Good night, everyone. Till tonight, God is good and God is good all the time. My name is Irma J. Spirit Divine. I'm here to give y'all a word on tonight. And the topic gonna be Jacob goes to Egypt. Jacob goes to Egypt. Joseph had revealed to himself, to his brothers, that he's alive, that he is Joseph. And so the brothers told their father that Joseph is alive, you know. And so Jacob gonna be dying soon. So Joseph said it's the best thing for all the families to be together when that do happen. So that's what we talked about yesterday. That Joseph had made himself known to his brothers, and when the brothers told their father, he needed he did not believe. So when the brothers had told him that Joseph was alive, he did not believe him at first. He had to see evidence to believe. Now Joseph had made some kind of quote or some kind of little quote thing that go over you, something like what Jacob made for him when he had disappeared. But Joseph had started still sowing that stuff before, while he was in Egypt. So when he made one for his father, so that was the evidence that he know, okay, this is my son, because he made one for Joseph, and Joseph still was sowing and doing all those things while he was in Egypt. Now today's lesson gonna be Jacob goes to Egypt. And God will speak to Jacob to go to Egypt, because Jacob was kind of afraid. He didn't see his son in 20 years. So Jacob would bring all his offspring, all his livestock. His flocks, his herds, all his possession. He gonna bring everything with him. What Joseph gonna have to speak to Pharaoh for them to have their own land, because they're Hebrew, and Egyptians don't like to live next to Hebrew. Because they figure they're detestable. They're detestable. So he have all his flocks and all that. They feel like it's unclean. So they have to be tucked somewhere in their own little land somewhere, and Joseph gonna come up with something quick for his family. So all that story gonna come from Genesis chapter 46, verse 1 through 34. So now Jacob, not Joseph, made himself known to his brothers. And the brothers let their father, Jacob, know that Joseph is alive. So Israel set out. His name Israel, Jacob. Sometimes he's used Jacob, sometimes he used Israel. But God changed his name. So Israel set out with all that was his. And when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to God of his father Isaac. They're always, representing sacrifices and everything to God, because God did so much for this family. He will continue on taking care of their offspring, you know. So now God spoke to Israel in a vision, at that night, and said to Jacob, Jacob, and he said, Jacob responded, here I am. Because God can read your mind and your heart, and He knows that Jacob was kind of afraid to go. He haven't seen Joseph in 20 years. When he thought his son was dead. So the God say, I am God. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation. He gonna make his offspring a great nation, and they're gonna multiply so greatly. And God said He will go with you. See in your song, God gonna always go with you. That's what He told the Israelites. When He escaped them, He said, "Don't be afraid. I'm gonna go with you." And see, God gonna always go ahead of you. So God said, "I will go with you to Egypt." You know, and I will. Now he told him he gonna go with you to Egypt, so he told them don't be afraid. Now Joseph, he said, Joseph, he telling Jacob, Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. Cause God already know Jacob gonna be dying soon. He gonna be dying soon. But his offspring be well taken care of by God. You know, Jacob left Beersheba, to head to Egypt. And Jacob's sons took their father Jacob and all their offspring. All he taking Jacob taking everything with him. Now he know he about to die, but he still wants to take everything that he owns, knowing he cannot take it with him. You know. So he taking all his sons, all his wife, all their children, all just taking all his offspring, you know, taking their livestock, his possession, you know, his herbs, his everything that he owned. Jacob is taking it with him. So we see that Jacob already have a big family, you know, and so much livestock. What they have to have a part of a land, you know, for themselves, you know, in Egypt. Now, all those who went to Egypt with Jacob, the member of Jacob's family, which, you know, went to Egypt, was 70 in all. There were 70 people with Jacob to go to Egypt. So they already was big. And when God tell them to multiply as a great nation, because that's what God told Jacob, you know, I'm gonna make you out of a great nation, you know, and they're gonna be a great nation. They already starting out with 70 people of members of Jacob family is following along with him to Egypt. So Jacob sent his son Judah, the one had spoke up to Pharaoh, you know, well, spoke up to Joseph about their brother when they didn't know that was Joseph. He was the only one that spoke up. So Jacob told him, "You go ahead on ahead of us," you know, to him to Joseph to get direction to Gerar. You know, so when they arrived in Gerar, you know, Joseph had his carriers and made ready and went to Gerar to meet his father Israel. You know, so soon as Joseph, now remember this is a family reunion. You know, it been 20 years since Joseph saw his father and since Jacob saw Joseph. He thought Joseph was dead all this long time. You know, so this is a happy ending right here. This is a happy story right here. When Jacob thought his son was dead, and now after 20 years, now you see that your son is alive. You know, and Joseph thought he never was gonna see his father again. Joseph went through so much hard time without a father, without any parent, because remember his mom was already gone. You know, so soon as Joseph appeared before his father, he threw his arms around his father. He was so happy. He wept. He cried. You know, there was a child that was 17 years old was taken away from his father due to his brothers. You know, so Jacob said to Joseph, "I am ready to die since I saw you." And see, Jacob knew in his heart. He probably knew in his heart, you know, that Joseph probably was still alive because Jacob refused to die. He refused to die. He was holding on, and then God already knew Joseph was alive. You know, God was waiting for this time, this point of time right now. You know, that's why God kept Jacob alive because he know Joseph was alive, and he know this point of moment was gonna happen. You know, so Jacob had said to Joseph, "I'm ready to die since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." You know, so now for 20 years, Jacob thought his son Joseph was dead. You know, but God allowed him to live for a time like this to reveal this happy ending. You know, God knew Joseph was alive. You know, so that's why God allowed Jacob to live because God knew they were gonna come back together. You know, so now that he see that he is alive and he ready to die, he ready to die. Now, at first, he wouldn't let his soul, allow his soul to die. You know, because he was grieving so much for Joseph. Joseph was his favorite son. Him and Benjamin, they came from Rachel. You know, so now Joseph is speaking, you know, to his brothers and his father. He's speaking to his brothers and his father because he see how much stuff his father have. Jacob have so much stuff. You know, he coming with him, you know. So the men are shepherds and they tend livestock and they have brought along with flocks and herds and everything they own. So it means Joseph had to talk to Pharaoh because they're going to need their own part of land, you know, because Jacob bringing everything with him. 70 members of his family coming to one here. Not alone the livestock, the herds, or the shepherds. He bringing everything. And see, Egyptians don't want to be next to that because they figure Hebrew is detestable. You know, figure that's unclean. You know, so Joseph is giving them instruction on what to say if Pharaoh asks. So if Pharaoh asks, their answer should be, your servant had tended livestock from our boyhood on just as our father did. So then you will be allowed to settle in a Goshen, the land in Hebrew. This is a land that's in Hebrew. I mean Egypt. For all the shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. So all what Jacob have is detestable to Egyptian, and so that's why they don't want to live next to them. They will need their own land for all the detestables, animals, and everything that Jacob have. So we see that Jacob goes to Egypt, and since he know that Joseph is alive, we also see that Jacob bringing everything that he owned, even though he know he about to die. He cannot bring all this with him when he died. But he trying to bring everything that he owned with him. You know, but he have so much stuff, and the Egyptian did not want it to live next to Hebron. So Joseph had to come up with something quick because he saw all that his father had, and because they are Hebrew, and he talked with Pharaoh for them to have their own land. Joseph and Jacob, happy ending story. To see each other after 20 years is amazing. And now Jacob said he is ready to die. He been mourning for 20 years for a son that he thought was dead. You know, the boys, his other sons, that lied to him. And they never told him that Job was alive. That he was thrown in a pit. And okay, Daddy, we throw him in a pit. Oh, we sold him. They never told Jacob that. They told Jacob that their son was ate up by a wild animal. And this man mourned for 20 years, thought his son was dead. And now after 20 years, you see that your son is alive. His soul could not die. But now that his soul had no rest, he ready to die since he saw Joseph. So detestable shepherd, you know, all Jacob shepherds are detestable to Egyptians, so they could not live next to them. Perhaps Joseph claimed that shepherds were detestable, referring to shepherds being unclean, and therefore unable to participate in religion. So because of this uncleanness, the Egyptians did not want it to live near the Hebrew. Therefore, Joseph wisely put his family in a somewhat isolated area in Egypt, which also helped to keep them separated, detained from the Egyptians. To keep them detained from the Egyptians because they probably gonna want to attack them and all that kind of stuff. So they to put them way in the land. They own Egypt property, but they way in the land, Goshen land, way far from the Egyptian. So God, God through Joseph continued to protect and keep, people for himself, separate from the rest of the world. So a nation that will become and still remain today a focus of world event. God got his glory off of this here. So much glory off of this plan that he made years and years before. See, God made plans years and years ago. That's just like mine. My power was made before I was in my mother's womb. It just it took 400 years for God to go back and rescue them. We know his plan was way years and years before this because he talked to Abraham way back in the beginning of the Old Testament. He talked to Abraham about his plan, you know. And so the Israelites did become a great nation. Jacob deceived eventually returned to Canaan. But Israel's slavery in Egypt for 400 years fulfilling God's plan, that the words that he had spoke to Abraham, you know. And the book of Joshua give an exciting account, of the Israelite entering and conquering Canaan, the promised land. So Jacob never returned to Canaan. But when he died, they brought his body back to Canaan to bury. You know, this was a promise to his offspring, that they would return, they will return, and Joseph's own hand will close his father's eyes. So we see that Jacob was going to Egypt to spend the rest of his ending life with his son Joseph, who he thought was dead. And that's the best thing to do. He thought Joseph was dead. So to have a reunion, to go back to be with the son that he thought was dead, was amazing to Jacob. It couldn't be a better place for him to die right next to his son. And then his son gonna be the one that closed his eyes. You know. And so Jacob had so much stuff. Jacob was blessed. Jacob was blessed. So he had so much stuff. What Joseph had to think quick on what he gonna do, because he wanted his son. He know his father was dying, so he know he wanted his father close to him. So he had to come up with something, because my father have to be here with me. I need to be with my father before his last days. So he came up with quick. There is Hebrew, and the Egyptians do not want to be next to a Hebrew, because all their shepherds and herds and flocks and animals are detestable, meaning unclean. So Joseph did talk to Pharaoh. He did find a land, Gushan. Um, so they'll be isolated way in the land somewhere far away from the Egyptians, so they won't even pick with them. So Joseph did that for his father, for his whole family. Even for the brothers that put him in a pit and caused him. He did, he was mad for a little while, but he got over and he took care of them also. He forgave them, and he also took care of them, put them in the land. And it explained to them what God gonna do. That God gonna come back. He gonna come back for y'all. You here in Egypt, but when God come, He gonna put y'all in the promised land in Canaan. Because that was they were living at first when they had to go to Egypt, because that's what God plan is at in Egypt. They would have to become slaves. That was part of God's plan, because of Sarah took her a slave girl servant to sleep with Abraham. So they had to be slaves. Just like God had told Jacob in a dream, a couple of passages ago. He said the land that you standing on, you're gonna have to leave this land and go to Egypt, and then you're gonna return back to your land. You see, that's what all God plan is coming into light now. And so Jacob had to get out of Egypt and go to Canaan. His whole family. That part of God's plan. And the famine gonna come. Then it's gonna be so severe, so they had to put themselves as slaves. That was all part of the plan too. They're gonna be slaves, and then not knowing they're gonna be stuck there for 400 years, because Joseph gonna tell them God gonna come back. So it don't matter how long that he came back, God came back for. God made them conquer their promised land. God told them you're going to come back to this land. They came back to that land and conquered that land. So God's whole plan was fulfilled, and it was glory. He got glory from this story. That's all we talk about, and we also still going to be talking about, because they're going to become the Israelite. They're going to become the great nation. They will be free and released from being in slavery. They will conquer their promised land. So all these things gonna come to a place, and we will talk about it, because we doing Bible study from the front to back, and I love it, because you learn it so much of detail, everything that's going on from each book to book. So that's all the word I have for you all today. Y'all have a blessed and safe night, and I see y'all on the next video.